Hey guys, this is Hunter with You Don't Know Ball. Today I'm going to be grading all the head coaching hires that happened this hiring cycle. As always, if you don't know ball and want to know ball, be sure to subscribe. We bring you guys daily content. Leave a like. Let me know your favorite head coaching hire in the comments. I'm going to give every team a grade, but before I do that, I'm going to go into an explanation on kind of why I believe they deserve that grade. So, starting off, I have some notes here that I'm just going to be reading off. We're going to go with the Commanders hiring Dan Quinn. So, the Commanders got their new head coach in Dan Quinn, and it seemed to really be like their third option. It seemed like they were really targeting Ben Johnson and Mike McDonald, and it seems like they were kind of stolen away from the Commanders. And in both reports, obviously there were reports that Ben Johnson wanted too much money, but at the same time, I heard similar reports that Mike McDonald got paid more money to go to Seattle. And in both those reports, it seems like both head coaches wanted more money than the Commanders were willing to offer. And it's obvious that they wanted to go kind of with a younger head coach profile. And Dan Quinn is about 16 years older than both of them. And I don't think necessarily that Dan Quinn is a bad hire. I just think new ownership and GM lost out on candidates because they were putting all their eggs in like the Ben Johnson basket. I think Ben Johnson was the Commanders' number one guy. And, reports come out that, Johnson didn't interview well, wanted too much money. But at the end of the day, as soon as Ben Johnson withdrew his name, they moved very quickly. And my thing is, I question the validity of the Aaron Glenn interviews. I don't really know where I saw anything else regarding Aaron Glenn being interviewed. And Breer did mention that Washington was committed to seeing this interview process all the way through, obviously resulting in losing some candidates. And Quinn had connections to their new GM, Adam Peters, because he was with Kyle Shanahan, obviously, and Shanahan was with Quinn in Atlanta when they, went to the Super Bowl. So apparently, his references were super good. He really did well on his interview, and that is how Dan Quinn ended up getting the job. So this is what I will say about Dan Quinn being the hire for the Commanders is he is definitely going to bring culture and identity to a Commanders team that has really struggled to be anything of substance since 2012 when they went 10-6. And the last time that they were over 500 was in 2016, thanks to a tie. I believe they were 8-7-1. So they haven't made it past the first round of the playoffs in almost 20 years, and two team name changes. And this happened in 2005 when they made it to the divisional round. I don't think this is the worst case scenario for the Commanders. It's obviously not the best. Honestly, Cliff Kingsbury being the hire for the OC was kind of their saving grace, in my opinion, because if you're going to get a rookie quarterback, I don't necessarily know if hiring Chip Kelly, kind of an older mind, would have been the best option after hiring Dan Quinn, who is 53. Obviously, with the way that the league is moving, they want to go towards a younger mindset when it comes to offensive head coaches and quarterbacks, and having Chip Kelly along with Dan Quinn doesn't really fit that. So this grade that I'm going to give the coaching hire is less indicative of who Dan Quinn is as a coach and what he's going to be able to do with the team, and more of the whole process that the Commanders went through. I just think they went really slowly. They didn't really move with urgency, and in that case, they lost probably some of their top guys, regardless of how Dan Quinn interviewed. And, regardless of your feeling of how Kingsbury is, he does meld with a rookie QB mindset better than it would have been with Quinn and Chip Kelly. So with that being said, I am going to give the Commanders a C++ because I don't want to it's so close to a B- hire, but it's just like, to me, it's not there yet. And this hire feels like a high floor, right? Like, regardless of if the Commanders are competing for one of those top spots in the NFC in the next 2 years, it does feel like they're not going to be at the bottom of the league, especially in the NFC, in a weak NFC. So going on next to the Seattle Seahawks hiring Mike McDonald. So this hire, outside of one other hire that I'm going to talk about, is probably the one I feel best about. And the only reason this is not probably my best hire is because the other one, the organizational fit and the experience, just that you can't compete with it. So McDonald is a young defensive-minded head coach who has impressed as a coach in the coordinator role ever since he was hired by Michigan in 2021. Now, previously, he was with the Ravens from 2014 to 2020, and he moved up his way through the defensive coaching ladder, starting as an intern in 2014 when he was around the age of 27. So at Michigan, he posted a top 10 national defense, won a Big Ten conference championship, and went to the college football playoffs. The team finished with a national ranking of number 3. So after a successful year in college, McDonald was rehired by the Ravens in 2022 to be their DC, and both years that he was their DC in 2022 and 2023, leading the defense to a top 10 numbers in multiple categories, taking a positive jump from 2022 to 2023. So he was top 10 in 2022 and improved on most of those numbers going into 2023. So usually when we see young coordinators hired, is from the offensive coordinator side, but in my opinion, with a young and promising secondary in Seattle, and with all those weapons you have on offense, I think you should really focus on maximizing the defense, because you still are going to be looking for that answer at quarterback for a while, and your defense is really something, in my opinion, where you can maximize their potential, and they can win you games. So I don't really see the Seattle Seahawks missing much of a beat going into next year, and I actually think they can improve on their 9-8 record due to the fact that McDonald can utilize the team's talent better than it was before. And obviously, I don't think you're going to have much of a culture problem with moving on from Pete Carroll to Mike McDonald. He was basically with the Ravens for his whole career, and the Ravens are one of the best organizations in the NFL. Moving on from a Pete Carroll who is known for culture, is known for the quality and pedigree of their organization, replacing him with a guy like this, I think is one of the best case scenarios that the Ravens could have came out of this coaching, or not the Ravens, the Seahawks could have came out with this coaching cycle for. So for that, I'm going to give Mike McDonald a B. So the way I'm doing these grades is I don't really believe in A's because I think there's so much like complexity and room for error. I only gave one coach an A in this, and we'll get to them later, but a B is probably the highest I'm going to give. I'll even honestly give Mike McDonald a B plus hiring. B plus. So next we're going to go to the Falcons with Raheem Morris, and I know this by Falcons fans wasn't really universally loved, but after talks with Belichick and Harbaugh seemed to fall through, according to Diana Rossini, Blank really wanted Belichick, Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons. But the people in the room with him wanted to go with Raheem Morris, and they leaned Raheem Morris. So at the end of the day, Blank decided to go with the people that he trusted and went with Morris. So Morris has had a very interesting NFL career as a coach. In 2002, it was his first year as an NFL defensive quality control coach, and he was hired by the Buccaneers, who ended up winning the Super Bowl that year. And he would stay there until 2005 before leaving to go to Kansas State. He returned to Tampa in 2007 as a DB coach, and then was promoted to head coach in 2009 after Tampa Bay fired John Gruden. Firing John Gruden seems to be a theme in this coaching cycle. And at the age of 33, mind you, 33 in 2009 as a head coach is kind of crazy. He was in a league of his own because only one coach was hired younger than him since 1965. So Lane Kiffin was hired in 2007 at the age of 31. And I can only imagine, how that must have been. Like, the age of hiring young head coaches really didn't start until McVay was hired, and now we see it all the time. But before then, it was all about experience. So he finished with a combined record with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers of 17-31. He posted one winning season at 10-6, the others being 3-13 and 4-12. So he was fired after that year, and he went on to be the Commanders' DB coach during the RG3 days. So he was with Shanahan, Kyle, Mike, and he was with Sean McVay. That whole tree, obviously Mike LaFleur, the whole group was there. So he's been around some winning coaches, and After that, he was hired by the Falcons in 2015 to be the assistant head coach and defensive pass game coordinator. And then from 2016 to 2019, he was still the assistant head coach for the Falcons, but also moved to offensive pass game coordinator. So he switched sides of the ball. And if you remember in 2016, the Falcons went to the Super Bowl. So of the three places he's been, in the NFL, he went to 2 Super Bowls and he won one and he lost one. So then he goes in 2020, Dan Quinn is fired. He's promoted to interim head coach where he went 4-7, finaling out at 21-38 as a head coach. So he then goes to be the DC of the Rams from 2021 to 2023, and he wins a Super Bowl with the Rams in 2021. So now he is the head coach of the Falcons. He's been reunited in Atlanta with 3 Super Bowl appearances and 2 wins, while also working for John Gruden, Sean McVay, Dan Quinn, Mike, and Kyle Shanahan. I'm going to give this hire a B because, one, he brought in Zach Robinson, who was the passing game coordinator of the Rams, who obviously anyone from the McVay tree or the Shanahan tree, very valuable. And he was hired as a head coach at 33 years old in a time where coaches really weren't getting those interviews. What that tells me is that he is seen in the league as a very respected and smart individual who is capable of leading a team, even at a young age of 33, when most coaches weren't getting the opportunity that young back then. And it's been a long time since he's been not a real head coach, but not an interim head coach. And I think working under very successful people for so long and being a part of so many winning teams, being put on a Falcons team who has the talent to go far, it has the talent to succeed in the NFC, I think this is going to bode very well for the Falcons. And while it may have been an underwhelming hire, considering the fact that they interviewed Bill Belichick and Jim Harbaugh, both very sought-after coaches, Raheem Morris is not a consolation prize. I think he's going to do great things for the Falcons, so I'm going to give the Falcons a B hiring. I think with all the experience he has working under all these other great minds and what he's been able to do with those winning teams, I think this says a lot about who he is as a person and a coach. Next, we're going to go to the Panthers, Dave Canales. So this one is kind of hard, kind of a mystery because he doesn't have a lot of coordinator experience. Tepper did give him a 6-year contract. So we're going to look at kind of what's available to us and to what he's done. So Dave Canales is from the Pete Carroll coaching tree. He spent most of his time with the Seattle Seahawks. He was with Pete Carroll in 2009 when he was at USC before making the jump to the Seahawks in 2010 with Pete Carroll. So he worked his way up through the offensive coaching tree, and he has been credited with helping Geno Smith revive his career as he was the quarterback coach in 2022 with Shane Waldron, who was the OC for the Seattle Seahawks, who is now the current Bears OC. So in 2023, he was hired to be the OC of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He then led Baker to his first 4,000-yard season, a career high in yards, as well as a career high in touchdowns. They also won a playoff game when no one really expected them to, and almost won their second playoff game against the Lions. This is a quote from Greg Olsen, who was with him in 2020. This is basically what he said about Canales. We both love talking ball. We love trading ideas. He was very open-minded and very smart. He's got a lot of energy, and he's ultra positive. So, in my opinion, after the very depressing rookie year for Bryce Young, and when I say depressing, I'm not talking about his play. I'm talking about just the situation, the overreaching owner, Frank Reich being fired, just everything that went on with the Panthers this year. I think this is a very good hire in terms of just the health of Bryce Young's career. I think you need a positive, not overreaching, kind of mopey coordinator. I don't know, not to say that any coach they would have hired would have been like that, but to hire someone who is ultra positive, very energetic, I think was the right move for the Panthers. So I also think with the 6-year contract. It provides a little bit more stability for Bryce Young going forward in his NFL career. So I will give this hire a B- strictly because of the lack of coaching experience. And Bryce Young is already on his second head coach in his is going to be his second year. So my thing is, when you hire a guy who has never been a head coach before and has only been a head offensive coordinator for 1 year, you're really gambling. And I think this has a really high upside, but I also think the floor could be pretty low. Now, I will say I think their record will definitely improve. I think even last year, being 2-15, I think their roster was better than that. I think they could have at least, or they could have won 5 games last year. So B- for Panthers and Dave Canales. Next, we're going to go to the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh. He is 182, 74, and 1. And that is Jim Harbaugh's complete record across his coaching career through NCAA and college. That is a 71.01% winning percentage. That is ridiculous. That means he is winning games 7 out of 10 times. The Chargers have a history of losing and choking, chargering. And after 3 years of disappointment from Staley, and you can even go as far back as 17 with Anthony Lynn, the Chargers have underperformed, and it is pretty much a unanimous consensus that based on the talent they have greatly underachieved. Even with a top 7, arguably higher ranked quarterback in Justin Herbert, they have underachieved. Like, teams would kill to have Justin Herbert as their quarterback, franchise quarterback, and they have still not won a playoff game. So Harbaugh has won everywhere he's gone. He just came off a national college title at Michigan. In 2010, the 49ers were 6-10 under Mike Singletary. In 2011, Harbaugh took over as head coach and led them to a 3-13 finish, losing in the conference championship. Next year, went to the Super Bowl, lost. The year following, they went to the championship, the NFC Championship, and lost. And then after that, they went 8-8. And this is 2014. They mutually part ways. This is when Harbaugh goes back to college. So this is what I say. This is what I will say. One thing for sure is with this hire, the potential of the Chargers will be maximized. Regardless if Harbaugh is able to have success in the league again after being gone for a decade, you know you're going to be getting the best out of your team. Regardless if it works out or not, he was a can't-miss, like, home run candidate that is worth the swing regardless of the result. We should expect a completely different Chargers team this year, and I'm very excited to see what they do. I'm going to give this hiring an A. All right, let's go to the Titans with Brian Callahan. So this is one of the most interesting hires after moving on from one of the top quarter of, I would consider Mike Vrabel a top 8 coach. So a top quarter of the league head coach. Like, I would consider him one of the best head coaches in the league. And they let him go because I know the vision between the front office and Mike Vrabel is very different. Vrabel wants to win now. The front office wants to rebuild. And I think once they traded A.J. Brown, that was really when everything started going downhill. So he doesn't have really any play calling experience. He's been in Cincinnati. And as we know, Zach Taylor is the play caller as the head coach. So he won a Super Bowl with the Broncos in 2015 as an offensive assistant, but then became a quarterback coach for the Lions and the Raiders until 2019 when he was hired along with Zach Taylor. So their passing offense has been top 7 for 2 years and top 15 in the most recent year where Jake Browning had to make a decent amount of starts. 2019, I'm just going to throw that year out. That's not when they had their quarterback. Obviously, Joe Burrow was also hurt in 2020. So 2021, 2022, and 2023, they've had 2 top 7 finishes and then a top 15 finish. So my question for this is, where does the success from the Bengals come from? Is it the result of Joe Burrow? Is it the star-studded wide receiver group? Is it Zach Taylor? Or is it Brian Callahan that's holding all this thing together behind the scenes? I have a feeling it has to do with the ridiculous quarterback talent, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd, and probably Zach Taylor. I understand why you could hire Brian Callahan, because he is a part of success and he knows what it's like to win. And in a passing league, he was a part of a very highly ranked passing offense. But with the lack of play calling experience, and you have a second round quarterback, Will Levis, who showed promise, but you don't necessarily know if he's going to be one of those top guys in the league, I don't love this hire, and I think it is a little risky. So after being hired as head coach, he quickly hired his dad, Bill Callahan, who is known for being one of a great offensive line coaches, and the Titans could really use that expertise, obviously drafting Peter Skronsky last year, being in a prime position to draft one of the best tackles in the draft class this year, and overall just improving their O-line play. It was not very good last year. So hopefully Brian Callahan can bring some of that offensive magic to Tennessee. But this looks like it could be one of those swings and misses that could set the franchise back a couple years, especially if Will Levis does not develop like you want him to, and they have to take another swing at quarterback. For that, I am giving this hire a C. Next, we're going to go to the Raiders with Antonio Pierce. So Antonio Pierce won a Super Bowl in 2007 with the Giants, beating former Raiders head coach Josh McDaniels, who I believe was the OC at the time. And this kind of caused a split between the two coaches during last year in a meeting. When Pierce was talking about the Super Bowl, McDaniels pulled him aside and basically said, "Don't talk about the Patriots like that. Josh McDaniels is a tool." So McDaniels was not a player's coach, and Pierce was the linebackers coach, who was very well received by the players. A lot of players I know did not they did not like McDaniels very much. So McDaniels was fired October 31st, and Pierce was made the interim head coach, finishing with a record of 5-4. The situation is not unfamiliar for Raiders fans. When Gruden was fired from the Raiders, Rich Bisaccia was promoted to interim head coach. Players rallied around him, spoke out to keep him as their permanent guy, but Mark Davis went another way, hiring Josh McDaniels, who was not very liked by the players, and I'm sure it rubbed the locker room the wrong way. So when Mark Davis was put in this situation again, I feel like he was put in a place where it's like, if I don't hire this guy, I think there might be a mutiny. Like, I don't know if there's going to be an actual mutiny, but Matt Crosby spoke out and saying he really didn't want to play for the Raiders if they were to pass on Antonio Pierce. And at the end of the day, like, they put up 63 points on the Chargers, a division rival. Like, they could have possibly scored 70. And my thing is, that is enough proof to give the guy at least another year. So here's my thing. This grade is really tricky because there's only really a small margin of victory here. With odds stacked against the Raiders, if Pierce turns out to be the guy, then that is great. But if he doesn't, it's going to be viewed as a situation that could have been easily avoided and by hiring a head coach with more coaching experience, because Pierce has only been in the league since 2022 as a head coach. And my thing is, this could have been avoided if you just gave Bisaccia like one more year. Like, you wouldn't be in this situation. Like, because if you hire Bisaccia and it doesn't work, you can't go down that road again. But because you messed up on that decision the first time, you're dealing with it down the road. So this one is a kind of a wild card. I'm really rooting for Antonio Pierce. I really like him and I want him to succeed, but the chances of that happening, in my opinion, are just low. So I'm going to give this grade a B- because situationally, you couldn't have hired someone else because it just would have been the wrong move for the whole building. Because if you hire a guy and he doesn't succeed, it's going to look really, really, really bad for Mark Davis. Next, let's go into our last coaching hire, the Patriots with Gerrod Mayo. So Mayo has been a linebacker coach for the Patriots since 2019. Once Belichick retired, he was promoted. Well, I shouldn't say retired. Mutually parted ways with the Patriots. He was let go and was promoted to head coach. Apparently, this was established when Bill was, previously still a Patriot, and they were able to avoid the standard hiring practices and procedure enforced by the league due to the fact that this was already written into contract that Gerrod Mayo would be part of the succession plan in Bill Belichick leaving. So Mayo played his whole career as a Patriot from 2008 to 2015 and won a Super Bowl with the franchise in 2014. So that kind of begs the question for me, what will we get from the new Patriots head coach? Because the Belichick way kind of stopped working once Brady left. And in my opinion, if this is a guy who has only been a part of this organization, how do you know that it's going to be any different? And I know definitely being a player for the team, he's probably going to be a little bit more player oriented, but there was never a GM in place when Bill Belichick was leading the team, because he had team control, and the Pats have still yet to hire a GM, and I frankly have zero clue what the plan is. Mayo has never called plays. That was left to Bill. Alex Van Pelt, their new offensive coordinator, has never called plays before. Their DC, DeMarcus Covington, has never called plays. A franchise led by the greatest head coach of all time and the greatest quarterback of all time is now led by a staff with no GM and zero head coaching or play calling experience. Please tell me, if this was not the Patriots, what people would be saying about this situation. It is probably one of the most obvious situations set up to fail ever. Like, if you were to just blindly say this is the situation, you would tell me this is a master disaster waiting to happen. Like, the fact that it's the Patriots, and because they've been so successful, I believe they're granted some like grace and slack. But the reality is, this is just not a recipe for success. And I really hope I'm proven wrong. But the grade I'm about to give is less about what Gerrod Mayo can be as a head coach and more about the situation that the Patriots have set up for him. I just find it hard to imagine the Patriots have more than 5 wins next year with a rookie coaching staff, with no current starting caliber QB on the roster, and a talent barren offense. All I can say is, like, what the hell? Like, what is this situation? So I'm giving this hire a D- strictly because it's like, I just don't see any situation where Gerrod Mayo is able to succeed. As unfortunate as it is, I like Gerrod Mayo and I want him to succeed, but even if you draft a quarterback into this offense, who is he throwing to? Who is he being protected by? Like, I do not love this hire. I think this is kind of the downfall of the last kind of straw before we see a full-on downfall of the Patriots organization. They're very clearly the least talented team in their division, and I just don't see how they succeed at all. So that has been my head coaching grades for all the head coaching hires this offseason. Let me know in the comments your favorite grade, what grade you thought I was the most wrong on. Leave a like, and remember, if you don't know ball and want to know ball, be sure to subscribe. We're bringing you guys daily content. We really appreciate all your support. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great rest of your day.